Do you remember how to do this?
What?
How to do a podcast?
No. I remember how to talk, but that's about it.
Well, lucky you, because I forgot. Like I've been like a monk for a year. I don't remember how to talk.
Oh, I know. I'm just going to put my pop shield on.
Yeah, see? It's full of dust.
Yeah. You know what? Never mind.
We're live, by the way, man. I'm not going to edit. I'm not going to edit a lot of this, and I don't even know if we're going to put music in the top. So yeah, we'll see. Let's see. We might do half an hour. We might do 2 hours. I don't know. Depends. I have no notes.
Where the
Didn't
wind
prepare
takes
anything. Like I told you last week, just do one and see what happens. Because there's so much to talk about, and then at the same time, so little. No, it's not true. So, guys, we haven't seen each other for a year.
No, not even like this.
Nope.
I don't think.
Let
alone in the flesh.
Well, in the flesh, I've read. There was. What was it? I think it was University of Oxford or something. They tried to do this comparison of lockdowns. Like lockdowns meant everything and nothing depending on which country you were in. Some people say, "Oh, it's very hard here," and I could see them going on dinners, and I was like, "What?" And they said that they found a stringency. I guess they called it like a factor of stringency. They said the UK was the highest and longest in the world. I don't know if that's true, because of course everybody will feel that their own version was tougher because we only experienced one, not many at the same time. But it was but
I can believe that.
It's horrible to say this, but I gotta get used to it, right? We normalize this kind of stuff. Where it was like at the first, last year was like, whoa, nobody in the streets, and now you're like, well, yeah, we're home, and maybe for you and me it was easier, right? Because easier as in because we've never been to an office for so long.
Yeah, well, I think that's a big part of it. I think I've talked to a lot of people who struggled that were regular office dwellers. And that was taken away from them, and they're suddenly at home, and that took a lot of adjusting. I think it really upset a lot of people. But yes, for you and I, life wasn't that much.
Yeah, a bit. You were the funny bit is that last year when we recorded a few, but you were already on a personal break, which meant you were already not very much. This is what guys remember. I had guests, and then also did the monologues.
Those were great.
Thank you. And then the break became a break because at first I said, yeah, well, there's a lockdown and we don't know what's going to happen. So I'm going to take 3 months just to kind of not do anything. And then 6 and then 12. And there we are. We haven't done an episode in a year. For you, a bit more, actually.
I remember we're talking about it when travel dried up, and we just thought we could do this. We could talk about the impact of COVID on the travel world and the airline sector. But then I think we both agreed it would just be like a eulogy.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to be sort of, remember the good old days and all of that. That would sustain an episode maybe, but then it's just self-flagellation.
Yeah, and also it would be about just talking about bad news on and on. And at the end of the day, we've always thought ourselves as a bit of an entertainment show. Of course, we talk about serious stuff, especially me, because I know I can get into these professorial tone and go on like lectures about what the world should be. But I was like, and like what you just said about the fact that we got used to being at home easier than others. And you're like, I'm not going to talk to people that are losing their jobs it's fine. Because frankly, especially the first lockdowns for us in the UK was March to, let's say, May, June last year. I kind of enjoyed it at the beginning. Of course, it was kind of for work. I don't know where I was going, trying to find client, whatever. The whole thing was tough, but there was no one in the streets. There was no planes in the sky. There was very quiet. The weather was actually also fabulous. And it was like, I kind of enjoyed it. Like I can already feel that some people here are saying, Paul, just go on an island and leave us alone with your lockdown. but
no, I think a lot of people felt that. I felt the same way for that period when the weather was so nice, and you sort of go, well, nothing is going to happen work-wise, and this will all be over by the summer. And so there was that sort of balance of no or less obligations or different obligations, and then that optimism of, oh well, it'll be fine, and maybe we'll have learned a lesson or two, and then
I think the one thing we learned is that everything we think goes quickly takes a long time. I mean, we're still in it in a way, right? And 2021 could be actually even worse, depending on where you are, right? Currently, if you're in India, for instance, not great. But also that I know I'm going to self-qualify both of us as smart people when I say that, so sorry for the bragging, but I think if someone hasn't changed 10 times their minds in the past year, there's something wrong, because I thought, at first, it's going to take 6 months. And I mean, we all said, we knew recovery 2023, 4, whatever, which is still on track, basically. Mm-hmm. But, we learned we're going live with all the new stuff. We're like, oh, there's a virus. Oh, there's a variant. Oh, this works. This doesn't. We should do this. We should put the kids to school, not to school. And it's so hard. And that's also the other thing why I didn't kind of want to record, because the noise level around us, as in maybe not us, because we're not a lot on social media, but was so high. And I was like, I don't want to get into debates and get people saying, no, this is bad. I'm like, whatever. But yeah, that...
Yeah, there was so much speculation and so much armchair, just prophetizing, if you will, just people just trying to predict the future, and it wasn't going to happen. And then it all got exhausting, because you would find something that aligned with your own hopes, and you would hang everything on that. And then, of course, inevitably it would turn out to be, vapor,
which is very human and understandable. I understand that
of course, you need something.
If you don't have, especially for those who lost their jobs or companies, or of course you want to believe that your framework is the correct one and this will be over. And I think actually some governments here in the UK, I truly think that they thought it would be over in 3 months. What I was more pissed off about for a while was people that kept saying it's over. And every time we were slapped in the face, and they never changed their minds. I'm like, and even, sometimes deleted their past tweets and past articles just to kind of reiterate the same thing. And I was like, I don't think the story is written. I don't think we will. I'm not even not sure we will ever know what was the best course of action to have done. I think obviously lockdowns did work, because when you put everyone at home, well, of course the virus subsides. Yeah. I called it I want to thank the guys at Fly. So it's a Seat 1A, Fly Seat 1A, is it? When they got me, I called it a forest fire. So of course, when you put the wood into a house, well, there's no forest fire. But I don't think the story has been fully written. We don't know. There's been so many different behaviors. We've seen countries do totally different things, and it worked. In some countries it didn't work, or it worked for a while and didn't work. It's really hard, right? So
it is hard, and it's been really interesting. I mean, for most of 2020, we all looked to Asia, and Oceania, just sort of said, "Oh, I'm so envious. They're nailing it. It looks like they're all going about their lives," and now they're sort of all glancing at us, going, They're smashing this vaccine stuff.
I know that
there's a disconnect.
This is interesting. I thought about it a few months ago. I was like, is it because since they didn't have it as bad as we did, when I say we, is of course Europe and the US and a few other countries, maybe the sense of urgency to get the vaccine is not as high because they kind of weathered this. I mean, we see people going in, concerts in Australia or events in Japan and so on and so forth. So maybe the sense of urgency is not the same. So suddenly, we have no choice but to put a vaccine in everybody's arm because that's our way out. Whereas in Asia, they can probably wait a little bit longer. I'm not sure it's a great strategy, however, because at some point the world still has to open up, right? But yeah.
Well, that's the key. That's the key. And that's talking to friends in Australia saying, life is normal. Life is good if you have no need or desire to leave Australia. And that, as you say, that won't last forever.
No. But you remember how...
For many
remember how we were both saying, what, Australia is saying they're going to stay closed until December 2020? Are they mad? And now we're like in April 2021.
That's not possible. That's never
we're all
work.
basically... We're all basically still stuck. But it's... and Australia was a kind of weird case because they made it also very hard for some Australians stranded abroad to come back because they were so strict.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of know that because every time you try to bring an apple into Sydney Airport, they basically arrest you. No, I'm kidding, not arrest you. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's not that far off. They'll make you feel pretty horrendous about it, and they can fine you pretty hefty amounts.
But yeah, I mean, guys, I didn't take any notes, so I don't have all the comments that you've sent us throughout this past more than 12 months now. And I mean, you've the great support from a lot of people, and I will do that in forthcoming episodes. By the way, to set expectations, we're not going to promise an episode every 2 weeks or whatever. I don't know what we're going to do. We're just going to chat when we want to chat, and that's about it. Probably maybe invite some people because some people are stuck at home anyway as well, so it might be easy to get on a podcast.
This is true.
But we had a lot, and some of those were people, Ben, I'm thinking like in Australia, and some people were in the US, some people were in Asia. They were all over the world, and the experiences were all so different. At the same time, so common. I think it's the first true global event, as in like really everybody felt kind of it. As in, you think about when we talk airlines, 9/11, of course we all felt security, but the risk of terrorism at airports was not the same in every country. This one is truly global. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you can talk to any person in the world, and they will have a shared experience. They'll have a COVID experience. Yeah. You're right. There's not much that we've all experienced. Even things like global wars. There are some regions of the world that were relatively unaffected by those. This, I don't think anybody's escaped it, at least tangentially.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted, and I said that let's do one, is that, I mean, obviously we're in the UK, meaning the vaccine campaign is doing pretty well here. That's one thing we did right, because honestly the rest was kind of catastrophic. I mean, it's not been a great look for the Western world. I don't like that term, but you know what I mean. The past 12 months. But so of course we kind of have this cautious feeling of it's getting better because we just had a second, I mean, depending how you count lockdowns, but pure lockdown, it's a second big one. It's the fourth, depending on how you count. But at the end of the day, it's a big one. We started like in December. We're finally slowly getting out of it. The vaccine seems to be working. We had the data there from Israel, for instance. It looks good. So obviously there's a feeling for me that there's some light at the end of the tunnel. It doesn't mean that the light is tomorrow, but especially depending on where you want to travel. For instance, for us, traveling we're on a very strict travel ban in the UK. Not as strict probably as Australia, but very strict travel ban. We need to provide a form if you want to leave the country with proof of why you leave in the country, and then you have to quarantine them.
Which I've done.
Yeah, I'll ask you because
that's interesting.
I think we need to assess that to address that. I haven't set foot in an airport since February 21, I think it was last year when I came back from Dubai. And I knew that would be the case. I'm not planning to travel, actually, probably not in 2021, unless perhaps Japan opens. Well, that will be for later. We'll see if they freaking open. But yeah, I know you've traveled, so I'm going to ask you because I'm very interested. I want to tell Sharon and Ronaldo, two friends. I had interviewed two friends that were traveling during the pandemic because I was thinking back 6 months ago, more than that, actually, it was June last year, that I would do another episode, and I never did, which means that I have these unused interviews that I might just put out at some point. And so I learned about experiences, how it is to travel, and from other friends like you probably have other friends that have traveled. But yeah, you've done it. So I'm very curious. I've been invited a few times to travel, but obviously the rules in the UK that sometimes it's a bit, the rules in the UK, guys, are a bit weird, but you have hotel quarantine upon return that you have to pay yourself for. So I'm like, this blocks a lot of destination. And then the self-quarantine, meaning quarantining at home, is fine for us again, because we work from home, so if I had to be stuck for 10 days at home, I'll be fine with it. There's the test that you need to pay for, but I mean, this is expensive if you want to just take a stroll, and you used to pay $50 with, EasyJet, because the tests are still expensive. But I would have done that. But
they are very expensive.
The thing that was difficult for me is the unknown of the rules changing. Like a country could be added to a list or another list, and you're like, okay, so by the time I depart, I'm fine. And when I return, oh, you need to go to a hotel. I'm like, oh, really?
Yes, that has caught a lot of people out, especially with India.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the rule, yeah. So yeah, but so since we're here, I mean, I don't have any notes or any threads. So you did some travels last year. I think you went to the US a few times. Of course, the rules were different back then. The UK was very late in declaring some sort of travel restriction. It was very open for a very long time, which caused a lot of controversy. Again, here, science will tell us one day what was a good action, but I mean, whatever. So tell us, what was maybe the first one you did? I think was it Boston or California you went or something?
Yeah, Boston. And I've only been able to travel to the U.S. I've only traveled once during this latest travel restriction. And that's an interesting experience. No, twice. But looking back and comparing kind of at a macro level, the thing that struck me, other than the sort of the practical elements of how airline travel is different, which I'll come on to in a second, is even if the rules are clearly laid out, the application of those rules varies wildly from trip to trip, airport to airport.
I would add. Sorry to interrupt. I would add. However, you just said clearly laid out. Sometimes I was reading the rules 5 times. Like, it's still very open to interpretation to what it actually means at times. But go on.
Yeah,
sorry.
And the conclusion that I've drawn from that is, I absolutely agree with you, and B, I think it feels much more of a deterrent than a prohibitive.
Yeah. Oh measure. Man, I so agree. I'm so glad that somebody else sees that. I was telling all my friends, it's a signal. It's to tell people do not travel, but it's not impossible to travel. We've seen a lot of people, and especially, correct, I guess, in our av-geek world, there's been people traveling. I kept telling them, guys, you're not the standard. There's most people do not travel. Yeah. It doesn't mean it was impossible, but I think you're right. I think it was a lot of it was a signal to basically deter people from traveling. And yeah, exactly. That was so happy that you see that as well.
It definitely, I am a rule follower. And so I studied those rules both for the US and the UK and read a lot of articles interpreting those rules. And I think looking back now, having done this, a handful of times, the strategy seems to have been, let's make this as expensive and faffy as possible to put off 95% of anybody considering leisure travel. Yeah. And, for the business people or people working like I was, it's a means to an end, and you're going to maybe somebody else will be paying for it. The cost,
I'm sure, because everybody who's been listening to this show knows. But in the meantime, man, I've looked at the start this morning. We gained so many listeners. I don't know, maybe it's the first time they hear us and a new episode. You have an American citizenship, which of course helped you enter. I would not have been able to enter the US for the
past. Well, you know what's super interesting about that? I had the same understanding. Yes, I do. I'm a dual citizen, which made getting into the US, and that's something I need a little tidbit I need to share towards the end of this. Relatively, and I use that word purposefully, relatively straightforward. The travel ban from the US, which includes all EU member states and the UK, which we were and then we're not.
Yeah, that's another thing that happened.
Of this, means that if you come on a flight from one of those countries, you are not allowed to enter. However, if you are a British citizen and you fly to Turkey, and then you jump on a Turkish Airlines flight to San Francisco, you can get in.
I mean, I've seen that. I've seen friends doing that. So via Dubai. So Dubai currently for the UK is very bad because it's on the red list, meaning that anything that comes from Dubai, and I think Doha as well, so poor Qatar Airways and Emirates, you have to go to a hotel quarantine. That's the definition of red list in the UK currently. We're talking here about 2021 rules. However, like you said, if I had gone to Dubai and then taken Dubai to New York, I would have been let in.
Yeah,
I know.
which seems slight. I mean, because we've come to understand a little better the incubation period for COVID and the potency of the transmission during, after exposure and during contraction. So that workaround is dangerous, and it seems slightly.
But then again, don't you think?
But it's there, and it hasn't been legislated.
I agree.
Against.
Look, for one of the other reasons that I didn't want to record is for a while I was like maybe too stringent on the rules because I'm a rule follower. I was born in Switzerland, that's almost a cliche. People in Switzerland like follow the rules, right? But like in the same breath, what you just said about it being a signal or deterrent, that's how you called it. The numbers are so low anyway. As in, there's so few people that would use a loophole, if we call it a loophole like that. That does it actually truly matter? I mean, it's easier to say that now in retrospect because we've been able in the UK and in the US is currently going okay. I mean, there's a race between the variant and the vaccine, but the vaccine is also going pretty well in the US. So in the inside, it's easier to say, but these little numbers of people that were taking these routes were already exceptions. You and me were known to do this. So maybe on the grand scheme of things, even though, of course, the virus was going around, maybe it wasn't that big of a deal. I don't know, man. You're right? On a pure stringent level, I would say, yeah, I mean, it is stupid because even currently, I mean, somebody from India, I mean, maybe India now is being blocked by every country, but could theoretically travel to a place where they can land in the US, in the UK, in Europe, etc., by doing like 2 layovers.
Yeah. No, that's what was so interesting. And I think, in the last, 18 months, 14, 15, 16 months, I've been to New York, Boston, San Francisco, and LA. And more than once to most of them. And the experiences have been completely different each time, which doesn't make it, even if the rules were the same.
Do you think?
Even if I was traveling within the same period and the rules were the same for both countries, the process was different every single time for exit and entry to both countries. And it all depended on the day. Not necessarily the route because they're flown the same route and the procedure was different, which is confounding to me. I think the first time I flew to New York, I just getting into the U.S. As you get off the airplane, there in the jet bridge, there were CDC reps in full PPE taking your temperature. Looking at your negative COVID test, making sure that, and not just glancing at it to see that it said negative, matching it against your passport and this letter or declaration that you had to fill out, which is, have you had ever COVID? Have you had any of these symptoms? And then when you had to declare what you were going to do when you got to New York State. If you were transiting, you were fine. If you were staying, you had to quarantine. You couldn't leave. And they had the army in arrivals checking that form and saying, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? And if you're, they were all very friendly. By contrast, in San Francisco recently this year, I walked off the airplane, not a soul. I didn't talk to a single person. Didn't have to show any paperwork, no negative COVID test. When I got to immigration, the U.S. have a new system now. I didn't even have to show my passport. It's all facial recognition. It took, without exaggeration, 30 seconds. I didn't talk to a single person. They didn't look at any paperwork. And I'm like,
well, that's the future then again. I mean, this is probably the one thing that's one of the things that's been accelerated at airports and entry. I will do, since I haven't traveled, for forthcoming episodes, I will do, I'm like you. I don't like nostalgia. I don't like looking at the past. I don't think there's a back button when people say, let's have normalcy back. There's no back. We get something new. I hate the term new normal because this is also BS. It sells consulting hours and books, right? But it's the one, and so I will discuss these travels. I stopped when I was in New York, so going to with Singapore Airlines, this huge flight to Singapore, and then staying in Singapore less than 24 hours, going to Hong Kong and first class, both in Singapore and Cathay Pacific and all this. And one was actually in Dubai, and they had this system already of biometric entry into the country where you basically just walk. And there's no prerequisite to pre-match your passport, website when you're about to travel. And it looked like the future a year ago, and now it looks like something that probably will be implemented. But sorry, I interrupted your story.
No. You're actually it's an important point, because you're right. I think it has accelerated so much of this weaponization of technology and just the broad application of it. BA and American are both using this app called Verifly, which takes the pain out of, because there's so many pieces of paper that you have to produce, and sometimes you're asked for them, sometimes you're not. You bring all of them with you: negative COVID tests, proof of booking your day 2 and day 8 COVID tests here. Is it the CDC or Department of State declaration that you don't have COVID that no one ever asks you for? The Verifly app, you put in your flight details, you put in your passport information, you take a picture of your negative
you upload
COVID
stuff.
test, which
That's
is
what
then
I heard.
Yeah. It's then manually verified and sent back. And once you've ticked all the boxes for the required by the country that you're going to, it generates a QR code and your picture and a green border. And when you check in, you just show it to the person, and they go, I don't need to see anything else. You're good to go. I don't need any paperwork. I don't need to see anything. You're fine. They just scan it. Same at boarding.
But that's the airline. That's not the country.
It's both. Okay. And I think they're starting to do this sort of data sharing. BA, American, a few others have done it, which is removed the friction from this process. It's something that we've been talking about in the industry forever.
Yes, I know.
And it because you now have to arrive at the airport like my mother does, with a whole binder of paperwork that no one is ever going to care about. But actually, you never know when they say, "Oh, yeah, I need to see your," because the process now, again, changing depending on terminal. To get to a check-in desk, you have to show a negative COVID test in T2 at Heathrow. But then at the first wing at T5, you just waltz straight in,
Maybe is it because it's more integrated, because only AA and BA that fly from, so for those who don't live in the UK.
And Qatar and JAL.
Yeah, but they're all one world. By the way, we should talk about alliances, because I think that's an interesting thing. We thought they were dead, and probably they will be reborn in like the phoenix.
Sure.
Because T2, for those who don't live in the UK or haven't followed, T2 at Heathrow is so the only 2 terminals open. They'll reopen Terminal 3 soon, but T2 has everything, and T5 is, at first was B and AA, and they added the rest of One World, which probably means it may be more integrated, whereas T2 is a free-for-all. I don't know. Maybe that explains why there's so much difference. I don't know. I mean, I'm just making shit up right now.
No. I think that's very possible, and I think because the rules, or at least the procedures, have been so fluid, sort of at a governmental level, and then excuse me, each airline having to go, okay, well, now how does this apply to us? Changing their procedures and then communicating those procedures to staff in the airport. It's always going to take some time to get adoption, but that for me was
it was already the road. I mean, IATA was working on their thing. So I haven't worked with IATA, by the way, full disclosure, for the past year, but on their thing called One ID, which was this idea of this idea of putting all the documents on digital, so including your passport. So basically what you're just describing right here. And this is actually the foundation of their travel pass, which is one of the competing standards to find a common global standard, because that's the other problem. Is like, you've had these experiences between the UK and the US with BA and AA, but then what about Emirates, and what about Cathay, and what about, I don't know, JAL, and what about Virgin Australia? I mean, they only do domestic now, but because it's basically dead. So And the idea is to say, okay, let's put one app where you get your passport, I mean, at least your proof that it's you, Alex, or me, Paul, and that you've had your COVID test or whatever requirements with lateral flow, PCR, 80%, whatever the things, because that's the other thing.
Yeah.
And everything in one place that is accepted. I think more than 30 airlines have already trialed and are trialing, the IATA Travel Pass. Singapore Airlines and Singapore, the government, are making it a standard. So that would be one of the ways. And it would be easier for us future global travelers to have one standard, or at least 2 or 3 and not 28 or even 100 of different ways of accessing countries. And because the rules will still be for a while very widely different, because every country will believe something different. Every country will have maybe a different stage of their pandemic. I mean, we're seeing what's happening in India, Pakistan, Philippines, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, these countries currently, or Brazil, or some of the countries in Latin America. They're still an asynchronous way of seeing this pandemic. So of course there will be variation in the rules, but we should have at least this. And it was there. I mean, you and me were talking about this all the podcast long about, it would be so easy to have an app to do this and this. And I think the one different thing with Verifly, is that the name of the app you mentioned?
Verifly.
Is that I think Travel Pass and Common Pass and a few others, because some governments, especially in Asia, are a bit afraid of fraud. They don't want you to upload your own document. They want to have a direct interaction with the lab or with your vaccine provider, which is a state basically in most countries now. There's no real private. I mean, Hong Kong has some private, but in most countries it's still the state running the vaccination programs to tell, which vaccine, first, second jab, or single jab if it's what's Johnson or whatever. So I think that will be the case. Will that be the case forever? I mean, if this pandemic, if everybody, it's not the case yet, but if everybody gets, at least enough people get vaccinated, maybe the pandemic kind of dies and then we don't need this. But I think this will be our daily occurrence for a while to have, and it will be so much simpler because I'm waiting for this, man. Sadly for me, and then I'll let you continue with your US stories, the reason I didn't fly was not that I was afraid to fly, whatever, is that, as you know, my market has been Asia, and Asia is almost shut with literally no way to go there. By the way, thanks to you, because as you know, guys, Alex is from Kent, so he's the patient zero for the Kent variant. I was thinking about you.
I am the monkey from the movie Outbreak.
So go on with your US stories. I mean, I'm really fascinated with that. So it was...
Yeah, I mean, it was just... It's been really interesting to sort of certainly not travel regularly compared to what we used to do, but just sort of maybe once every 3 months throughout this, just and different airlines and different airports. But even going into Heathrow with the big sign saying passengers only beyond this point, and then seeing the sort of passenger numbers start to rise, and then a new travel edict comes out, and then they drop again, and then even the experiences of people asking, why are you traveling? And then people, a month later, not asking why you're traveling.
I'm sorry because it's not exactly related, but that's the other thing that made me not want to record it. It's been, probably it's very human. We've all been kind of stuck at home or stuck in a place or less traveling, et cetera, et cetera. And there's been this tendency of suddenly seeing the world through, of course, the internet and very locally, but looking inside out, right? You're looking like during the first lockdown, as soon as you saw somebody in the street, like, what is he doing there? He's not supposed to be there. And this kind of sentiment happened with travelers. I could see in both directions. I could see some people that either they were envious or they were concerned or they thought it was stupid, like questioning why people are traveling. And there is, for some people, an actual reason to travel. First of all, authorized. It's not illegal to travel to attend a funeral or to attend some type of work. And second, I've seen travelers, that has been a bit sadly enhanced in the AvGeek world, just dissing those who were not traveling. So are you afraid? Well, you should, and I was like, guys, it shouldn't be a battle. I mean, first of all, we're all responsible for our own, level of comfort, I guess. But adherence to the law, which was very high, by the way, all these articles saying that people are cheating is not true. Most people adhere to the law when they're told not to do something. They're told. Of course, if for some people it's hard because they lack money and they need to go out, for instance, of course they will. But that's the thing, that this kind of judgment on choices of people was a bit unsettling for me. I'm like, first of all, I'm happy if someone can travel, because first, if they are allowed to, some countries never. I think, for instance, Mexico, Tulum especially, was a big place where a lot of people went, but there was almost no inbound restrictions. So fine, if there's none. You can go. I mean, why would you not? And then, so I'm not saying you shouldn't be responsible and shouldn't be cautious when you travel, especially at the height of the pandemic. And I'm talking height of the pandemic for the UK or for the US. Now it's lower. But to bash people online, I was like, I tuned out. No. I'm not on Facebook anymore. I'm not on Instagram anymore, which, by the way, I should point out, I know I talk a lot. This is one of the reasons, guys, that I kind of stopped replying to a lot of people, just saying, hey, guys, how are you? It's not because I didn't want to, but because I just tuned out. I said, whatever. I just don't want to hear this anymore. It's not interesting. There's other stuff to care about in life. So going forwards, guys, I know you've always been very interactive with us. I'm not sure I'm going to be like every single day checking on who's, sent us a message. And I know 99% of them were super cool and super nice. And I can think of one guy, LA Flyer. He's been so, I got to know him, and I'm not going to say his name actually, because I know now his name. Like a super cool guy, super smart, we shared a lot. So these are the kind of people I want to continue to talk to. But overall, I'm like, they were like, why do you put a mask on your profile picture? And I was like, I didn't do that. I mean, did I? Maybe I did. But I was like, why do you have a hat?
Because I like being alive.
Yeah,
it is frustrating. And actually, it's really interesting you bring that up, because you'll sit in I was in T2, I was flying on United, and which is there's an interesting story there, which I think you highlighted actually on Twitter.
United.
Well, I flew business on United one way. I can't even remember why I did that. I think it was a rewards thing, and it was very good. But I went into the Lufthansa lounge in T2 and immediately turned around and left again.
Why?
Because it was this was in, the height when things were looking really, really, maybe October, and it was rammed.
Oh, wow.
And
I think it was the only one open at Heathrow, by the way, for Star Alliance.
Yes, correct. And then everybody else was using the Plaza Premium one downstairs, which is a very good lounge. But there was a lot of people taking advantage of the you don't have to wear a mask when you're eating or drinking rule.
Yeah.
And so they would have I was like, absolutely not. I'm going to go and sit in a massive open airy terminal. I don't even want to be inside anyway. About United, it was really good. I think I was one of two people in the business class cabin. They show this sort of propaganda video it's a little sort of 3-minute science explaining video of how they tested airflow and the risks down to 0.0001%. And this is the technology and the CD, blah, 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 blah. I thought it was interesting, but of course it was propaganda.
I love the way
the one thing, it was fine because I've flown on Delta, BA, Virgin Atlantic, and United. And United were the only ones. Everybody else, BA do this in-flight announcement, which is like, yeah, we scrubbed the airplanes, it's fine. United had this polished Hollywood production that they ran after the safety, maybe even before the safety video. But there's one thing that I want to get out there. If you hear anything that I say during this episode, is that from a health perspective, I felt much safer on an airplane than I did in my local grocery store.
But of course,
last year when things were really
but
bad.
of course,
for a few reasons. One, because there was way less people on the airplane. I think I flew one narrow body and the rest wide bodies, and I don't on the wide bodies. I don't think there was ever more than 35 passengers on any of the flights. There was one flight where there was more flight crew than passengers. But also the protocols, especially on BA, are so strict, with them saying, that you have to do this, setting the expectation early in pre-flight emails, then on board during announcements, and then enforcing those rules with mask wearing, not standing up, not waiting in line for the toilets, being very clear at when you board, and then right before they do meal service, that you cannot keep your mask off during the service. If there is anybody that's not complying, then the flight deck crew make announcements saying we're not going to take off until this done, and we'll have to offload you. You might miss your connection. And then just purely because of what we know about aircraft ventilation systems anyway, being far more weapons grade than anything I'm going to find in Tesco.
I agree.
And the combination of those three things made me feel far safer than any other environment I've been during this pandemic.
I fully agree. I think it was Han Chicago who asked me at some point, because I went to see Tenet last year in the summer, where, it was July, I don't remember. And, first time going to a movie theater after basically 6 months at home was like, what? And it was, we're like 3 people in a 500-seater, so it was fine. And he asked me on Twitter, would you feel safer being in a cinema or in a plane? And overall, of course, in a plane, because of all the HEPA filters and whatever, like you just said, what we know. That cinema, in a sense, I chose it as well because it was super well ventilated. 2 things interesting to raise there is, in terms of communications first, I think the airlines, the one mistake most airlines did, where, yes, most of them talked about, the environment in the aircraft. We know the studies have been made. I mentioned some of those back a year ago, but still there's some others being made. It's still possible to get infected in a flight. It's very rare. And it's actually there was even a study that showed that Delta, which are really highly as in they did this middle seat thing, that actually middle seat, even if it doesn't look like, you're still like not very far from someone else, it works. The point, however, that they missed, and I understand because they might not want it to tell, it was the main primary issue to bring people back on board was less about feeling safe in the aircraft. It's about governments not wanting anyone to come in. And we've seen what Hong Kong is doing. You have 21 days quarantine, and every time a flight arrives that has even one single person, or maybe the threshold is at 4, that is COVID positive, the airline is banned for 2 weeks. Emirates had that, Air India, like so many times. And so the communication was, it's nice to go in a plane, but the problem was more of the States. And the second point that I found interesting and also a bit infuriating is that a year on, our feeling that you and me had, that masks were a good thing because it's a respiratory disease. It kind of felt logical. We're not scientists, but he felt, and especially, come on, a mask is like a cheap thing you put on the mouth. And it will come. There's no like absolute protection of everything. People wanted black and white answers. I need one thing that makes me safe from the virus. No, there's not one thing. Is like you said, the aircraft being well clean, and thank God. Were they not clean before? And the mask and everything.
Wow, questionable.
But the point I was trying to make is that that's governments. It's not on the airline's fault. Is this insistence that is still going on about cleaning surfaces? We know now that getting a virus through touching something is super highly unlikely, less than 1%, that most of the virus is either direct droplets, so when you cough, or simply airborne, so it kind of stays and lingers around. So you need proper ventilation. I suspect, and I cannot say that for all countries, but for the UK, for instance, which kind of started only like a month or 2 ago talking about fresh air, I suspect they didn't want to kill the offices. Although it was banned to go to the office, there were still a lot of, not loopholes, authorizations for some type of business. And again, I'm here not talking about somebody who works at Tesco, like you mentioned, that has no choice but to go to work. There's no way you can do, I don't know, like repairs on an aircraft engine from your home. Although, the guys at NASA were able to put a thing on Mars, mostly working from home. But this insistence was probably because they realized that as soon as they were emphasized the fact that we needed proper ventilation and be outdoors, both the schools and the offices would be questioned by the public. And I think that's I get it. But at the same time, the lack of clarity sometimes from governments then influence the rest of us, influence like suspicion. Are they telling us the truth? Like, you remember when back in March 2020, they were telling us not to wear masks because the actual reason is that they were afraid there were not being enough masks for health professionals. Instead of just telling us, we don't have enough masks for health professionals, please hold off. They told us, yeah, we're not sure it's useful. And then, of course, now you have still people remembering that and saying, yeah, but they lied to us. Are they lying to us now? And they're like, yeah. And so this insistence of deep cleaning aircraft, which I find great, yes, but I'd like to have the entire supply chain of travel, so the airports as well, the lounges you just mentioned, the one in, I'm sure they're properly ventilated, but this insistence made that people are still cleaning their groceries. And I'm like, I never did it, by the way.
Yeah,
and I'm like, no, it's a respiratory disease. Probably the air is the most important thing. And I agree. I think in a plane it's pretty safe. I think it is.
I never felt unsafe on a plane at any point from that perspective. And they give you a little personal kit with hand gel and wipes and everything. So if you want to wipe things down, surface wipes and hand wipes, and that's reasonably reassuring. And saying the mask protocol and that face shields weren't enough. You had to have a mask and a face shield if you wanted to wear a face shield. They were all across the board very, very strict about this. What was and of course the boarding process changed completely. The deplaning process changed completely. I mean, boarding for BA anyway, no priority boarding whatsoever. It was done from the back of the aircraft to the front of the aircraft. For very obvious reasons, meaning you're not walking past people.
But then again, when you have 35 people, it's okay not to be in a priority.
Yeah, exactly. And then they changed it a little bit to have first class people go first because on BA planes they're at the very front of the cabin. Yeah. There's no chance that they need to walk past anybody. But you could be their number one traveler, and if you were in economy, you boarded last. But the whole process of boarding, like you said, took no time at all. Flights were always leaving early because there was no slot, fights or anything like that. But it's, interestingly, what you say about the lounges, whenever I went into the BA lounge, it was always reasonably full.
Okay.
Not like how it used to be on a Tuesday afternoon when we used to go.
Yeah, or even on a Monday morning at 8 when it was like the entire country was commuting. Yeah.
They've removed a lot of the seats. They've put plexiglass between seats. There's no self-service food. There's a QR code at everything. You scan it, it opens a website. You order your food on there, and it's brought to you. No alcohol in the BA lounges because you're not allowed to serve alcohol indoors.
Yeah, that's a law in the UK. So when, for context, guys, when the pubs closed, which was, of course, a big thing for a lot of Brits, obviously, I'm not Brit, but live here, that applied to a lounge. A lounge is basically kind of a restaurant or a pub, right? So when there was no alcohol being served indoors, that applied to the lounges as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's still the case as far, it will be until
May the 17th. May 17th?
Yeah, at least 20, at the earliest.
No, not 7. Yeah, 17th.
Or is it June 21st?
Yeah, whatever.
See, this is the thing. We're not 100% sure about anything anymore. But that was that is what it is. I still always sat in the sort of quote unquote outdoor area, which is just an extension into the terminal itself.
But that's quite airy. That part of both, even the other part, this BA lounge is quite, very tall ceilings and kind of open and airy. I wouldn't feel afraid or whatever. I mean, I would never feel afraid anyway. I went to Tesco every day after my runs and I felt okay. But I mean, it's I think it's an okay lounge for it.
It's not too bad. And I think because the level, the during some periods where there's hardly anybody, it meant that almost invariably you would see somebody famous,
Yes,
which is kind of interesting. So I had a lovely chat with Rami Malek, lovely guy.
Nice.
Paul McCartney. Yeah, it was pretty interesting. But the feature at T5 that I appreciated the most during this is the underground walkway to Concourse B and C, because ordinarily you jump on the people mover, and I remember going down in the lift, the door opening, seeing 50, 60, 70 people waiting, going, absolutely no
I'm
way.
gonna walk.
Door closes, go down, walk through this beautiful tunnel, get some fresh air and stretch your legs. But it's those lounges were okay. What's also been really interesting to see is the evolution of the service on board.
Yeah. I'm sure, because for a while there was first no service, then they put everything in plastic wrapping in boxes. I mean, here I'm talking general, I'm not talking about B in particular. Again, I haven't flown, but I've been following, and you could see that comes back to the point I made at the top of the show about changing your mind. It was a lot of the stuff we didn't know, right? So I want to point out, I was not, when I was saying that governments were insisting on wiping stuff, it was not a bad idea to start, because we didn't know. So we had to kind of be overly cautious. And airlines probably did the same in lounges and everything. They're like, okay, oh shoot, and the airlines had the added, I guess, pressure of wanting to make you, Alex, feel comfortable. So even if maybe they said,
well, there's a branding thing.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Well.
It's like
there's a differentiator, how you communicate what you're doing, and like you said, the policies around change fees and the policies around the middle seat blocking and all of that.
You remember Qatar?
Was
Qatar was insane when it was last year when suddenly they said, okay, you can change pretty much anything you want, and even destination, with no change fee, no problem. So let's say you were having a flight to Hong Kong, and then Hong Kong decides to block you from entry. You can just go on the website and change and go to Chiang Mai or go to Sydney. I'm making shit up.
And you could even change where you were going
from. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah.
For a while.
So you could change, like you not even like from Doha to I don't know, Dubai, but you could do like Doha to Sydney.
Interesting that you mentioned Doha to Dubai, because finally the blockade is over, so we can do that again. But I think probably some of it, and then I'll let you continue with your story, but some of it was also, they knew there was no passengers. I mean, there were very few. You mentioned having depressed travelers. I mean, not having a lot of people at the lounges and in your flights. I've had a friend who's done Zurich to an acquaintance, Zurich to Singapore. So Singapore is also closed. Came to Europe for personal reasons. Traveled back. He was in the business class of a Swiss 777ER, and realized he was alone in the business class, and then asked the attendants, and he was alone in the aircraft. Taking the entire aircraft. Of course, thank God, I think most of these airlines, I mean, they're losing money, shit tons of money, right? Even Tim Clark from Emirates said that more 6 months than this, and we're all going to start having real trouble, because this has been government help and everything. Like every airline in the world became Alitalia basically with the government help. but probably the ability to make these swiping and amazing offers or changes to refund rules and was also easier because the numbers were very low. So so it wouldn't change dramatically the bottom line, which was already horrendous anyway. I think IATA has shown it's actually, and that's probably another thing about how people perceive travel. If you live in China and you do domestic travel, it's up 10% from 2019. So basically it's growing. If you're in the US now, it's kind of it's still depressed, but it's becoming more normal because more people are vaccinated. Europe is still kind of closed because continental Europe is both having a bit of a wave, or a forest fire is reigniting whilst they're having vaccines, but they'll be fine by the summer. But then internationally, that's the issue. Internationally, I think January 2021, February 2021, and I don't have the numbers for March, are worse than 2020 in terms of like minus 88% or 91%. I don't remember. Again, guys, I don't have the notes in front of me.
I believe it.
Meaning there's really no one to travel that travels, which I think the indicator would not be to see how many flights are actually in the sky, which there are less, but how many people are the load factors. The load factors are super, super, super low for a reason. Again, you cannot enter most countries. If I want to go to Japan, I can't. If I want to go to Singapore, I can't. If I want to go to US, I can't. I mean, again, bar some exceptions like we just said about layovers, but overly, most of the destinations I would go for work, this is why I built the studio at home, man, I would I would not be able to enter. So I didn't even fight for it. I'm like, I'm going to wait until they reopen. I could go to Greece. Yeah, fine. I mean, not now probably because we still have the travel ban in the UK, but like next month. But so that's the depressed is still going to go. But yeah, go on. So do you, over the different flights you've done, you said 5, I think, doesn't really matter the numbers. Were they constantly, I mean, are they still like no one in the flights in the most recent one, compared to the first one you did probably earlier?
Yeah, there's the numbers started creeping up relatively as 2020 went on, and then this first quarter of this year they dropped again. So the numbers were really
because
low.
the fire took again. I mean, that was the worst. I mean, we had, thanks to Alex, we invented our own variant, the Kent.
We had our own special variant.
Which basically, by the way, it
Excellent
was a weird thing because suddenly all the countries kind of closed us. They said, we don't want any one of you coming here. And it was like, oh, shoot. But the blessing is, it's not a blessing because let's not forget people died and people have long COVID. My brother has long COVID. It's been a year. It's not great. So, which is another thing. When people talk about black and white, like how many people died, I'm like, it's not only how many people die and what age they are. And if it's only age, doesn't mean I can run over your grandmother and not having any issue because, she was supposed to die anyway. Yeah. That's not the point.
Yeah.
But long COVID, I had a friend of mine the other day. I was on Zoom. Oh, damn Zoom. I was on Zoom with him and suddenly he kind of opens his shirt and he has a permanent ECG on him linked to a hospital because he has long COVID. And I'm like, and the guy is like in his 30s. And I'm like, oh my. So the blessing, to come back to what I was saying, the blessing is that because we were kind of early to have that new fire in the UK, suddenly now it feels better and Europe is slightly delayed. And again, I'm here very cognizant that countries, like I mentioned them earlier, are in the middle of a very, very bad situation. Anyway, sorry. So, you said so the number are creeping up and then creeping down again.
Yeah, and then it dropped down again, and then I think when we introduced the more strict travel ban here, it did exactly what we said at the top of the recording, that it just sort of. People thought it's just too much bother. Yeah. And, you can't get into the US if you're not an American. Always the return flights were busier.
Oh, okay.
Because you can get into the UK and Americans can get into the UK with the same quarantine laws that we have and the ability to test out. But on average, you were doing about 6 COVID tests per round trip. For the entirety of the so you would have to take a COVID test to get into the US. You would have to take a COVID test to get back into the UK, and then the day 2 and day 8, and then test release if you want to, and then
that's the one that's optional in the UK. So you do day 2 and day 8. I've never done them, but day 5 you can do one that you have to pay on top. It's private, and if that one clears you can get out of quarantine, right?
You can get out of quarantine, and it's been interesting to see that technology. I was going to a place at Gatwick that was drive-through in the long-term parking at the South Terminal, and it was very efficient. It was they jam a thing up your nose and down your throat, and then you would get an answer in less than 24 hours. Now you can get a lateral flow test sent to you. You do a Zoom call with somebody who watches you do it, and then you take a picture of the result next to your passport, and that's gone from like 150 quid to 39.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing with competition. I mean, I think that testing will stay with us for a while. When I say a while, it doesn't mean 10 years, but for a while. But obviously, as more people start to travel, because borders within Europe start to reopen, et cetera, I think prices will go down. For a while, they were still very expensive. Currently in the UK, for instance, it's not for travel, but you can order rapid tests at home up to 7 a day. I mean, I've done that because the way the UK is working is so we have more than 50% guys that had their first shot, like reaching 25% that are fully vaccinated. So it's going pretty well. They're still a bit afraid, and that's a paradoxical kind of thing. They're still a bit afraid of they call it the variants of concern. You've all heard about those. So what they do is they monitor as soon as they see a variant of concern appearing in a region, they do like mass testing in that region to try to see how many people are actually having it. It's still it's very low because the UK basically has a very, very low now caseload. But my area twice we got the South African, and currently we just finished. So we all needed to do tests. I mean, they cannot forcibly do it. We're not, they're not coming to your door with a test, but it's kind of the thing you do for society, and because they can, what they want to know and will know because we're doing this live lab thing in the world to know, and the numbers, the expectations are good currently. That most vaccines seem to be working against most variants. Currently, the one in India that freaked out a lot of people I think we shouldn't be overly crazy afraid of the variants. We should be concerned. That's why they call it the variant of concern. And it seems to be working. The South African is the one that's a bit tricky for some vaccines. But, by the way, we're blood brothers, man. We have our first shot, you and me. Blood brothers.
Yeah. That was definitely a sense of relief nice. to get that first one. But you're right. I mean, and that's actually an important thing to say. With the day 2 and day 8 in the UK, even if you test out using day 5, you still must do day 8, and that is for variant testing.
Oh yeah,
they want that's the rationale, and so of course it's no problem because they you order the kits, they arrive, you go through this process of registering it with NHS. It's very well done. It's so easy, and at Heathrow there is a whole setup at the arrivals level of T5 on the far south end of the terminal, with every type of test that you could want. With to get into the US, you pay £59. They do the test, and you have your result and your certificate within about 25 minutes.
Nice. Oh wow, nice.
In the US, you have to pay like $219.
Oh, wow.
I mean, but that's the US, and we know their reputation for gouging when it comes to medicine. But
free market.
It's been interesting to see. Yeah, I know exactly how that's developed, but. Yeah, it's but to come back to a point you're making, like, yes, I mean, initially you would get a boxed lunch on these in economy and in business class on BA initially. And I have to tell
wasn't that always the case? No, I'm sorry.
Well, you know what?
Al Baker said that BA is a 2 out of 10 airline. I love that guy.
I saw that. There's part of me that agrees with him, and part of me
of course he likes to steer shit. He likes to steer shit, but
he does.
By the way, he actually kind of owns. He has 20% of IAG. So
20%. Yeah. So I mean, I think that was probably a little bit of G'ing up the troops. If you
he can be an ass at times, but he's very funny and entertaining to listen to. So.
He's very entertaining. Yeah. But it was.
So you were saying boxes of food in business class. So was that good?
In economy, in economy, it really was.
Oh, nice.
It was like sandwiches and salads, and it was much better than the standard BA fare. And then I flew back from New York and business, and it was a box thing, and it was absolutely delicious. It was like this Middle Eastern meze.
Oh wow!
And then the first flight I took back, when they said, "We're really happy to tell you that we're back to the normal service. There's glassware," and I was like, "Oh, okay." And it was okay. I mean, it was the standard, back to the braised beef and all of that. But they're like, at least we can pour you a glass of wine, and we don't have to give you a bottle that's from the same, that everybody else is getting. So it's definitely coming back to what it used to be in terms of service. But what was interesting and heartbreaking in a way, and this happened more than once, especially in the early days.
Yeah.
They would come and do the normal, if I was sitting in economy, which invariably I was, welcome back, Mr. Hunter, thank you for your loyalty, blah, 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 blah. And I would just say, I said to one lady, older, more experienced cabin crew, she was the in-flight service manager. I said, how's it going? And she kind of looked around the cabin and slumped down next to me.
Oh, wow.
And said, this isn't fun anymore.
I know.
I'm retiring.
Oh, fuck.
She's like, the magic is all gone. She's like, it's not fun. for any of
What you
us.
just said, of course, first I feel for people in the industry. I've got a lot of friends who lost their jobs, lost their companies, or the companies went down, liquidation, etc., all around the world, and so that sucks. So selfishly here, so I know it's not completely related. I've been good, guys, for the past year. My business has been, thankfully, touch wood in front of a big table here. It's okay. But part of why I didn't want to force travel, because I could have traveled, like for leisure, there were parts. It's not fun. I didn't want to go through all that shit. I'm like, I'm going to 25 tests and doing that. I was invited to Pakistan, for instance. So Pakistan was for work. It was when it was good over there, was authorized as part of work. I could have gone. But the rules were so complex. I had to take a test before I home, and because there were some specific rules. Anyway, it was Emirates rules. It was rules from Pakistan. It was rules from the UK. And I was like, will I go for 3 days? Like, it was not about the price, because the client would have covered probably all the tests. But it was also about the fact that I would have been not able to go out in Pakistan. Because, of course, maybe you can bend the rules a bit, but there was already like, I was like, why am I doing this for? Right? And the fun, a little bit of the fun. I'm sure you had fun in some of your flights. I'm not saying it's completely bad, but I'm sure part of it will come back. I said there's no back button, so I just did that. But yeah.
No, you're right. It was, and that was not an isolated conversation.
No, I'm sure.
When I flew back from New York once, I have to tell you about the Virgin Atlantic experience.
But was it?
As well,
sorry to interrupt here. Do you think, because you just mentioned New York, we've heard a lot of stories about flight attendants in the U.S. with all the people, the whole mask thing in the U.S. I'm not going to even go there. There was a lot of, pain from flight attendants, with a lot of articles actually in the past year about that, about how how hard it was to quietly try to police and being kind and having a lot of pushback and being insulted and being also insulted online. And you must make your job. You're like, guys.
I don't envy them at all. I mean, it's not fun for them, I would imagine, at the best of times.
Exactly.
When you're working a crowded flight on a busy corridor, that's delayed or whatever.
You always have, like, that guy was an ass anyway already.
Who's just going to be an ass. And it took a long time for the FAA to make it a law. And so then it became, the individual airlines made it policy first, and then it became a whole don't tread on me, you're infringing on my rights thing. And then the FAA finally, the FAA and the executive office or executive branch made it law, but way too late. And I had infinite patience and infinite sympathy for cabin crew, flight deck crew, anybody in it. I mean, beyond anybody else that's was deemed an essential worker during any of this and had no choice but to put themselves in the line of fire. It seems to have been, getting a little bit better, and it's been kind of fun actually because, let's set aside the negative ramifications of what I'm about to say or implications. The pool of cabin crew for BA is much smaller than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, of course.
So there were instances where I would have the same cabin crew on flights, and they're like, "Oh, hey, good to see you again." And you would sort of trade war stories. And I asked them, like, what do you, when you get to your destination outside, what do you do? Do you have to just go to a hotel? And they said, well, no, places like New York, we have to stay inside, or had to. In San Francisco, we can go out. There are places like the Seychelles, which we all fight each other for because you can go out, with it all.
And Hong Kong, I'd said, I'll take Hong Kong because it took a very hard line of this pretty early. The quarantine, the flight crew, the actual quarantine, like even you cannot do maybe it's changed now, but I think for a while, let's say, Alex, you are a pilot, you land in Hong Kong, you cannot take the flight out. You have to quarantine like everybody, and then so it will create costs for the airlines as well. So I'm sure the Seychelles, I would have
Cathay said that. Oh, I know. Go to the Seychelles and you can't do anything except chill for
fine for
3
me.
or 4
Fine
days.
with
But I
me.
know that Cathay said that the only thing that was keeping them alive was a slight relaxation of those restrictions for cargo crew.
Yeah. Because I think was it like they were having 600 passengers a week or something. Like I don't remember the number. Like
across the entire network.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So by the way, the guys they are merging back. I guess Cathay Dragon, that brand is disappearing. It's going to be Cathay. It's going to be much smaller. They're deferring a lot of orders, like all airlines basically. Maybe next episode we'll go over a lot of the aircrafts that are disappearing and airlines that have disappeared, etc. But yeah, Cathay is really, because again, they have no domestic market. I mean, that's the problem. When you are like some airlines have been able to, between subsidies and having some flights going on, like BA probably, the US was still happening. But Cathay, poor Cathay. I mean, they're on the brink.
I know. They've and it's not like, I mean, it's so interesting to have seen these airlines pivot quickly and go full cargo.
Full cargo, yeah. I think Korean Air was able to survive and actually make a profit just because they were basically just in cargo. Because Korea still is completely shut. There's no way to go there.
Yeah, it's when I've got my little ADS-B receiver on my roof, and I see like, oh, there's a Virgin Atlantic plane coming from Milan or Brussels. Wow. You know, these Dreamliners just rammed full of cargo.
Of cargo. Exactly. That's the only way. That's the story I've heard so many times by friends who were traveling. Like seldomly, like a few times this past 12 months, they were asking the crew, but how? And they're like, because I think the flight, that same acquaintance who went from Zurich to Singapore on the way in was also a very light flight, not alone in the aircraft, but like almost no one. And he asked the cabin crew, he hadn't flown for the whole year, it was his first time. And the cabin crew says, you know what we have in the hold? They said, no, we have vaccines. So probably, that's the only way they were making money. It was actually transporting the stuff that, you and me just would press Amazon buying something we want, because it's just,
well, exactly.
So you were saying that about the story about the flight attendant. You said you were leaving New York and you were having this conversation again with somebody you had previously seen. Is that what you were about to say?
Yeah. Well, actually, it was interesting. I was on a 777 and it was the BA suite. The new business class suite, which I'd never experienced before.
You did finally. It's nice, huh?
Yeah, it's very good. I was very impressed. And it was this little mini cabin. I felt very safe because economy was quite full because there had been a cancellation. I think the El Al flight to Tel Aviv had been canceled. And so there were a lot of people on that flight who had been put to go via the UK.
Because El Al at some point fully grounded even, you remember? They said, we're not going to fly.
Yeah, they did. They shut it down.
I was like, what?
Completely for a long time.
Yeah.
But she, the in-flight service manager came and she was like, okay, so I think if you want to put the door down, you got to press. She's like, I'm really sorry, but this is my first flight back in 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I'll show you how it works. Look, watch.
I'm going to teach you.
And I said, well, how is it? And she said the same thing. She's like, so far, not that fun.
Yeah.
I'm hoping it'll get back. She said, I spent my 6 months of furlough doing drive-through COVID tests.
Wow.
And apparently that was a big thing for cabin crew because they're first aid trained. They obviously have great sort of interpersonal skills. So a lot of them either are doing vaccinations now or they're doing mass testing.
So for context, guys, the furlough in the UK has a different meaning. It didn't exist. Actually, something we kind of invented it. We use a term that exists in the US. There's been similar stuff all around the world. Furlough meant that you stay on the payroll, so you're being paid up to a certain amount by the government, basically, through the payroll of the company. But you were allowed to do other jobs, so like delivery driver, or like you just mentioned. I say delivery driver because I know a few guys that were in the industry that did deliveries for a few months before being recalled. So in the US, it has a slightly different meaning because furlough, you're not paid, but you stay on the payroll so you can still have health care. In the US, they gave like these checks the government gave. In Germany, for instance, I think it was, or Switzerland, it was part-time unemployment. The government was subsidizing that. So there's been subsidies all around, which sucks. I mean, it sucks. It's great that they did it because poverty, still arose, but not to the extent it could have had otherwise. But you're not doing the job you love. You're not doing the job you love.
Yeah. I'm interested to carry on those conversations with cabin crew and just see, how's it going? What have you seen? What's changed? when do you expect your colleagues to return, if ever? But they were very melancholy conversations.
Of course, I think. Yeah.
The one joy that was universal, and I appreciated this as well, is when you're sitting in your seat and there's not really anybody around you, and you sort of hope that no one is anywhere near you, and you shift uncomfortably in your seat if somebody's or they cough and you're looking at them going like, "You look sick." So you're on edge. Like I had the same experience as you. I went to see Akira and the BFI IMAX screen,
theater,
and I couldn't focus completely on the movie because you're kind of looking around going, I don't know, that person is 25 feet away from me, but anyway, the joy of flight versus flying, the joy of flight has never meant more to me. And I have no embarrassment or shame in sharing this. The first flight I took, after months and months and months, and battling some other things in my life as well, we lifted off the ground and into the clouds, and I burst into tears.
I understand.
Because that magic was so potent and so powerful and so missed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. And it doesn't, I still get that feeling.
I think that never goes away. I mean, I took it for granted. I say I don't miss travel because I have this philosophy of life. Whatever, it's a big word here. I try to focus on what's there and not on what's not. So I kind of put traveling in the drawer in my mind and I say, I'll come back when I'll come back. Again, I use the term back. Yeah. You see, I said there's no back button. I keep using that. And I do that in general. Like I don't want to be either envious or jealous or sad or upset about what I cannot achieve, whether like I'm not going to be a bodybuilder or whatever. Maybe I can, I don't know, but I try not to think about this. It doesn't mean that I don't have any ambition. I have the ambition of flying again, as a passenger, but I put it aside and I said, "Oh, come back." Yeah. But yeah, probably I will have a very similar, because that never goes away. And the fact to be in other places and to see other friends and people and new cultures and food and whatever, that never goes away. And the conditions upon which this is happening currently is not fun. Clearly, I haven't experienced them. I've only heard about them, and you're telling a story right now. But if you work in the industry, that must be like, if you work in an aircraft, if you still work, first of all, because we've heard like many, pilots as well, and being, furloughed or even simply let go all around the world. Remember, we're talking about a shortage of pilot. There's no shortage of pilot anymore. That must be, it's like they're taking away what you do as well. Not only what you enjoy as being in the air, but what you do as a flight attendant, as whatever. It could be even ground operations. And that's, in general in life, I think the way to frame this pandemic is a natural disaster. It's the best way we can frame this. It's a natural disaster. We have to live with it. We will probably live with it for a very, very long time. It's going to get better because technology and science is awesome. I mean, come on. Honestly, I didn't believe we would have vaccines by like December 2020. No. I didn't think they would be 2025, but going that fast is pretty awesome. And
it's a testament to human endeavor that we were able to do this, and I have total faith in the efficacy of those.
I didn't even think about it. And I just took the vaccine. I mean, especially because there was a bit of the we would have literally crawled under broken glass to have a vaccine 6 months ago, or because we want to get out of this. And now people are like ordering a latte. No, I don't want this vaccine. I want this one and on that date. And by the way, I want the sauce on the side. I'm like, in this instance, currently, especially where, we're very lucky to be in countries that have a vaccination campaign compared to pretty much the rest of the world. There's only like, I think 800 million jabs. So you divide that 400 million people that gotten probably a vaccine. A lot of people don't have that luck and are waiting and will be waiting. I've seen numbers for Pakistan and Philippines. Of course, I know these countries because of, especially the Philippines, because I've been working in them. They expect to get like enough vaccines by 2023, 24. And people are now I'm not going to get this year. Probably it's going to change next year. Whether you're going to be like the numbers of vaccine availability will reach like tens of billions at some point, probably in 2021. That'll be different. Maybe you can go to a private doctor and say, "Oh, I want this one," whatever. But right now, I'm like, guys, they all work. to a certain extent.
Yeah.
They all work.
Well, it's right. Like when I went and got mine, the retired doctor who was administering it said, "Okay, now I'm going to give you the," and I was like, shh. Don't care.
I don't care. Yeah.
Don't care.
You're right.
Just juice me up, doc.
Yes, you're right.
He's like, well, no, you're having this one, and I had it too, and it's great. He said it's a great vintage.
Like a good wine. It's
I don't care what it is, just stick it in my arm.
Actually, it's interesting. I don't know if you've seen. There's been I think a lot of talks, but it doesn't happen with Dubai. Actually, you cannot currently still really get a vaccine if you're a foreigner. So the whole story about vaccine tourism of what would be vaxcation, I guess. The Seychelles, I think, or is it the Maldives? I forgot. Is about to do that. They are reaching, I
think it's the Seychelles.
Yeah, they went pretty fast. A smaller country makes it easy because it's not that it's easier. It's just that you have less people and there's less doses available in the world. So when you're smaller, you're getting faster. They want to provide that as a package. But in Europe, Serbia was advertising itself to Germans, especially, and people in the region because they were going faster. We have availability. So there's been a bit of but at the end of the day, just get a freaking vaccine this year. Just get one so we can get out of this a little bit. It's not only about travel. It's about simply allowing we're lucky. We've been able to work-ish. Some stuff didn't work. I'm not saying it's great, but I'm not going to complain, at least not me. But so many people don't have that luck, and you just talked about flight attendants and others. Let's try to give them some type of fun life again. And by doing our part, which is not very freaking hard, you put a thing in.
No, it's really not.
It's pretty well organized, by the way. I was not surprised, but it was super well done in the UK. And I've had friends in Singapore and told me, super well done. It's easy.
Yeah, it's incredibly well done here, and it's something I think this country should be very proud of. And I'm looking forward to getting my second jab.
Me too.
Soon enough.
Yeah, that's the other thing that is a bit unknown yet is what will it give us for travel? But it looks like that, at least in Europe, many countries are saying that they will open up for. It's not about opening up because even if you have no vaccines you can get with a test, at least in Europe, they will be available.
Yeah.
The whole thing that the vaccine could give you is to forego quarantine, which is the big thing, because why would you go for, the Maldives is cool. I always said the Maldives is almost a business model because I've been to the Maldives. You anywhere in a resort when you have your own bungalow. So you're basically in quarantine because you're not seeing anyone else. It's fine.
And there's no reason not to be in quarantine.
But in other countries, I don't want to do even 5 days. I'm like, currently, so I'm supposed to go in Italy next month for work. But currently the rules in Italy say that everybody comes from UK has to go through 5 days quarantine. I'm like, so I need to be 5 days before I can actually work for 2 and then take a flight back, which if Italy, it should be fine. But if Italy is changing these groups that we're about to announce, I might be going to a hotel. I'm like, no way. I'm just,
it's and again, I think that's the deterrent, right? Until things are under control. Yeah. But what the disconnect then is, once you've had the double vaccination, if it's a vaccination that requires that, then when does that become the official exception? You need to quarantine unless, and then proving that. So that'll be interesting to watch.
It will happen. I think it will happen, at least in Europe.
Oh, for sure.
I think so Europe will. It's still kind of because they're experiencing the fire again, but. By the summer, they'll have more doses than people, so it should be fine. And they're catching up. They were slow at the beginning. That's the other thing. It's not a race. I'm happy for every single jab that is put in an arm. I don't care about who goes there first. Oh. Putting politics and jealousies and I hate this other country in there. I'm like, guys, let's rejoice that any country that just even starts and goes somewhere with it, right? And I think the US, I don't know, because I wanted to ask you, I have this feeling. So the EU already said that they will probably accept American visitors in the summer. We don't know. I have this feeling that the US will do the same. There will be an announcement, maybe the 4th of July, or when Biden is supposed to come to Europe and into the UK now. In June, UK is not part of Europe anymore, and I'm pretty sure they will make an announcement. They probably US style say on the 4th of July we'll open to vaccinated people to the US. There might be something. I don't know. Maybe I'm making.
I think that there will be some reciprocal. This has been in the talks for ages, or really since this began. But with the vaccination rates neck and neck,
yeah,
really, that that wouldn't surprise me. I sure hope that that's the case.
Actually, it's fun because the one thing I talked about in the monologue, but everybody talked about for a while, was these travel bubbles. And actually, they didn't really happen. There was
No, even the Hong Kong, Singapore one.
Yeah, just is about maybe next month to do, but the only really actually travel bubble was Europe last summer, because last summer it was kind of open. We could go to anywhere we wanted for leisure, but all the others, no. So yeah, it took
nothing
time.
really materialized, did it?
No, but now it's starting. Australia, New Zealand just opened as well, I think. So yeah, it's kind of I want Japan to. Do you think the Olympics will happen?
No.
My God, I don't know what to think.
Nor do I think they should happen. But
that's another
not,
thing. I think there's too
I'm
much
not
money.
convinced that they will.
Yeah, I mean, they said no visitors.
That's probably true.
So no international visitors, which is not really fun already. They're going to be completely secluded in Odaiba. You know Tokyo now, so in Odaiba they will be the Olympic Village, and so if you're an athlete or staff, you go there, you stay there, you're in a fully enclosed bubble, and I guess when you lose your race, you leave or something. It's not really fun.
Well, you know what? The NBA did that.
Oh, yeah.
For most of last season in Epcot in Florida, and actually it worked really, really well.
Yeah, I've heard.
And it was sort of a model for that, but it'll be interesting to see if they have the audacity to continue with it.
Yeah, they're vaccinated also very, 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 very slowly. So, do you have any other observations from the flights you've done? Do you think, was it over time getting easier to do also, like personally? Do you get used to having to go through the tests and to all these barriers?
It's not a burden. You get used to the process, even though the process changes from time to time. I still don't do it lightly. I don't. I've had one jab. I still my personal protocol won't change or relax at all.
Yeah.
I think actually it'll even get even more stringent. The one thing that I experienced was I took my first Virgin Atlantic flight in about 6 years.
Oh, nice.
And freaking Virgin Atlantic, they pulled way out back from the U.S. I think they were doing New York and L.A. and that's it.
Yeah.
But they were selling to San Francisco and a few other places because they wanted to keep their slots. So I had booked flights to like San Francisco once, and then they would cancel it like 3 days before. And then there was no way around it. So they put me on an LA flight. I was going to LA anyway, but so it was my first flight, and I did LA, London in economy, and Dreamliner. I'd never been on a Virgin Atlantic Dreamliner before. Stepped on board, and I was like, wow, dude, these look sharp. This is great. I was in economy. I was like, there was one of 3 people in economy. The mood lighting, the IFE, the seat, it was all like really flipping good, like really sharp. And this member of the cabin comes back. They're like, so here's one of the things that's very important to mention. Virgin Atlantic introduced BA status match.
Oh, didn't know.
So you could say, I'm BA Gold, you send in proof, and they give you automatically the reciprocal tier that they have, which for me was Virgin Gold, which I used to be many, many, many years ago.
Before the birth of this podcast.
Before and I thought, okay, well, I'll do that anyway. Who knows? Maybe it'll be useful for Virgin. It'll be far more useful for Delta if I take Delta. So I'm sitting there in my economy seat going, wow, this is really, really good. One of the cabin crew comes and says, Mr. Hunter, it's really good to see you again. Come with me. Takes me up to upper class, their premium cabin, which was, hadn't been in since they'd redone it. Still the herringbone seats, but really good. The food was outstanding, but most importantly, the service was so good.
So hold on, they upgraded you in flight. Is that what you're telling me?
On the ground before we pushed back.
Nice.
Because interestingly, I asked at the gate, like, what it cost to go? And
there's no one in the flight anyway.
$1,600. I'm like,
what?
No chance. And then so they put me up there, and I was like, oh God, I didn't even pay anything. But the seat was good, the mood light, the food was outstanding, the IFE was really good. but the service was just so, it was what made Virgin Airlines across the group different and better when they couldn't compete on hard. But it's what I've talked about Virgin America for years. And it was enough for me to go, when you guys finally figure your schedule out, and if you can make it through this, I will be back. And I will be back often, because I was so impressed.
They were very, very, very much on the brink. They were the ones we thought we lost. Virgin Atlantic was, we discussing, I'm talking last year, we're thinking that because the UK hasn't given industry-specific help, which we can discuss forever. It's not today's episode, probably. Maybe it was fairer on a global, like on a country scale. What would you help more? An airline than help someone who's lost their restaurant? But that's a discussion for another day. I know that people might disagree. But really, that is the airline that I thought we would lose. I mean, Virgin Australia was basically got bankrupt and reborn as a domestic airline.
Domestic.
Maybe they will because right now they cannot travel internationally anyway. So, but yeah, I'm kind of happy they stick around, especially for competition upcoming. Because
it was impressive. I liked them. They are, if they can keep that quality, I will continue to fly them internationally.
I don't think I will be able to do, because BA has many airlines. All these airlines have extended their status, of course, one for 6 months and 12 months or 18 months. Like we're now, most are up to 2022. BA was kind of cheeky about that. BA is, depending on the date of your renewal, they're giving you for the second extension, so next year. I'm not getting it, and since I'm not going to fly, I doubt, unless they decide to. So basically, guys, if you were in the first half of the year, I'm simplifying, it's not exactly that, you would get an extension. And if you're not, you would either have to wait and hope to get an extension or try to renew in a much shorter time frame, because obviously, again, there's a travel ban here. So even if I wanted to renew, unless I flew Qatar all the time, whatever, there's no way. So I'm not sure I'm going to be able to match with Virgin, but I would love to try. BS.
Well, if you have gold, or I think they still have it open. If you already have gold, then you can.
I should do that actually. I haven't looked at my points and whatever for. I mean, gladly they're still here. I'm sure we'll see. We've already seen devaluations across the board because they wouldn't give you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, of course, but I should do that actually. BS taken they took the opportunity, and I know that pissed off a lot of people in the industry, but they took the opportunity to kind of revamp the airline and cut costs aggressively.
Yeah.
So we'll see, like renew, changing the contracts, what they've always wanted to do, right? So let's see. I'm still giving up. Of course, I'm not like Al Baker. I don't think they're 2 out of 10. I hope. I hope that most of the airlines we talk about usually on this podcast stay, because for the people that work with them, and also because it's nice to have a little bit of variety. I mean,
absolutely,
we have our favorites, but a bit of variety would be nice. Do you think so? Alliances? I think alliances will come back with a vengeance, because we thought, you remember, Delta was like, we're not really interested in the alliance anymore. Of course, they were in the worst of the 3 big ones, but if you have smaller airlines, which they all are now, because they had to kind of let go of people, let go of aircraft, let go of routes, and if you have a world that will be, at least for a little bit, still divided in regions that open to each other or not, for global travelers, you need to rely on other airlines. Thus, an alliance makes sense, right?
Yeah, because so many, as you say, they've pulled in their networks massively. So but they still want to be able to ticket through and sell through to those places they used to serve, and that their passenger base have gotten used to them serving. So I think that the value of network, and it's not even reciprocity anymore, is it? Because you're not competing. So I think if you had an instance where like BA and American were flying 20 times a day between New York and JFK, they will do every other flight, so that they're not incurring the cost, but they're able to sell through. So that will add to the value of the majors as well. And I think put even more pressure on people like Virgin Atlantic and Virgin Australia and other smaller kind of tier 2, if you will, carriers, because they don't have those fortified global arrangements in place with other major global carriers.
Yeah, no, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's still early to say because there will be airlines probably that will still we don't know. It's the timeline of this is still very up in the air. We have the impression, being in countries that have had and have currently vaccination campaigns going pretty well, we have an light at the end of the tunnel. Obviously, at least it feels like we have to be cautious. I think I've gotten, when I was thinking about it last year in March, I think I got pretty much, I'm bragging, pretty much everything right. I think it's catastrophe. It is one. It would take forever. It is taking forever. It's not going to be easy. And we will fix this. And we're fixing it with vaccines. But the timeline is the one thing that it's impossible to say. And again, we have this tendency of, because we're in a good place or in a better place now, we're like, oh yeah, it should be going better. Probably if you are currently in the Philippines or in India, you're not thinking that. You're thinking, oh, damn, what's happening, right? And I made one mistake. So because I'll call myself out, and this is why I'm being more cautious this year, because this mistake involved actually you, because I was texting you and I said that. I remember saying, I think it was in June last year, when we were basically going out of lockdown in the UK, and we succeeded, as in the caseload was going super low, and I went along with the enthusiasm and the happiness and and the kind of almost feeling of victory, and said, it's done. And I told you, I remember I wrote that we might have a wavelet in the fall, which turned out not to be a wavelet, because we're on a much worse. Which is why now, because I admit my mistake. Again, I was too carried, with the sense of euphoria that, wow, we're getting out of lockdown and we made it.
It's understandable, isn't it?
Yeah, but meaning this is why now I want to be. I was talking the other day. I work with some destinations. I was talking with Norway Tourism Board, and I want to be super positive, because I am, and you are. We are people that have a positive outlook on life in general. But because of that experience of last year, I have this level of cautiousness, in my head. I'm like, I don't want to sell it before it's there. So I think it's really, and this is why the reason why we're doing this podcast today, I feel that it's going better, but the timeline on which is going to be, the one thing I think, and I'm going to ask you if you agree with me, you probably agree with me. The one thing I will miss, there's not a lot of things I will miss for a while, is my favorite kind of trips, where when I did these crazy multi-city trips, the ones, and I'm going to probably take a few other episodes. I'm going to, do like a nostalgia and mention these trips that I've never done on the podcast, because then we stopped. I've done, it was Lisbon, JFK, Frankfurt, Singapore, Hong Kong, then Gatwick, Singapore again, Manila, Singapore, Dubai, Narita, Haneda, that was the return, Dubai. No, and those now with the rules, maybe you need like a test 3 days before, but if I take the test, and the rules might be depending on where you come from. They were like, but you've been in 5 countries in the past week. We cannot accept you. Oh, that is something that I think will take time. And coming to the question I wanted to ask you, probably for a while we'll need to plan much more our travels.
Yeah. I do, and I've been able to mourn the loss of those trips a little bit earlier. The circumstances of my life have changed a little bit too during the last 18 months, and I realized early on in that process that type of trip is just not going to happen for me for practical reasons for a long time. And it's funny because every now and then on one of the sort of time machine apps that look back at your photos and your posts, I'll see like just did San Francisco, London, Frankfurt, Dubai, Singapore, Shanghai, Dubai, Frankfurt, London in 3 days, and I was like,
whatever.
That was cool to say, when I was sprightly and in my 30s, but now that just doesn't sound like, especially with, as you say, everything else that's attached to airline travel now. That just sounds awful.
Exactly.
You're not getting all the fun stuff that you would get in
and getting
Emirates on
anxiety
business
as
class.
well too. So what?
Yeah,
Sometimes
it's
already
exhausting,
back in the day, I
emotionally,
was having
physically
anxiety of, and I had a few instances. It was not missing the flight, but would they let me enter? Did I do all the paperwork because I did strange route? Now I'll be like, my God, they will never let me because I don't have the proper PCR test, or I've been to another country, we suddenly changed the
You've
rules.
lost a piece. Yeah, exactly. There's something that exactly. So
yeah.
it doesn't sound fun anymore. And
I'm still gonna do the. Whilst you talk to us about some potential other travels you do here and there, I'll do maybe a segment in episodes. Well, because I've done the Cathay Pacific first, and I've done that and the Singapore 380. The Singapore 380 that's disappearing faster than I can say it. First as well, and I've done which, by the way, kind of capped off 12 years of travel for me pretty well. It was not exactly the last flight, but doing the Emirates first on the longest possible flight, which was from Japan to. So I still want, guys, even though it's probably changed the experience, I still want to, talk about it because it was kind of completely bad shit to being in a.
No, we have
crazy
to. We have to remember what was good and what we can look forward to.
But yeah, so do you have any? I mean, I don't know, because let's do another episode. We have a 1 hour and something. We can cap it off. There's so much other stuff I could say, but that was a fun one. Do you have any trips coming up? I used to be the question I would cap off the episode.
I know. Yes, I do. I've got to but to
actually.
the U.S. I keep. My father lives in France, and I haven't seen him since February 2020. So I'm trying to hope that I can get down there sooner rather than later. So yeah.
Okay.
And also being able to travel for work again one day.
Yeah, me too, because it was fun to build an entire TV studio at home. It's been fun to do all the stuff from home, and I've been quite successful at it, but less about the flights, simply being in somewhere else and seeing other people and, and just hanging out with friends in a bar in Tokyo or in the street food in Bangkok or whatever. I kind of miss that. And so, I want that more than the actual flying, which of course I will always kind of like, but it's I haven't seen Alex we live not very far from each other. We haven't been able because it was impossible. So yeah, guys, I'm not going to edit a lot. That's a kind of the new thing. I don't know where I'm going with this as in with the podcast. We don't know. Maybe we're going to do another one in 2 weeks. Maybe we'll wait a month. I don't know. The one thing I know is that I will take less notes because first of all, I'm pretty busy actually. Thank God, again, touching wood. I don't want to get into the stress. It was not a stress because talking to Alex is never a stress, but we need to prepare an episode and we have all these notes and all these news. I kind of want to roll with it and just chat. Next time will be probably very similar about what we have to say because there's not going to be a lot of new things to say, but and I'm not going to edit a lot. It's going to be more a freestyle type of recording. So unless Alex, he knew that before because I texted him, unless he says something completely out of whack, I will, because I'm a friend, of course, I will remove that bit so he can plead the fifth. And and I'm not, and I'm a bit sad, but I'm not going to be since I'm not as active online, please do not take it the wrong way if we do not answer your messages, because it's not because I don't like what you guys have to say or you have lots of great feedback. Is that's just don't want to deal with being too much online. I found a very kind of nice balance, at home and reading and enjoying my very local neighborhood, and I don't want to kind of spoil that for the moment.
No, I think you're very wise. But however, I will mention some of the good stuff that you guys sent me probably. So I will take a little bit of notes for the next one because you've been some of you guys that have been very active, and I know they're in a folder somewhere sending us super nice words about how cool or things are. And I'll finish with that. The last reason I hesitated to put another episode is for 5 years we had been recording and we had a lot of people. I never really cared about stats because for us it was just fun to do. At the end, it was never it was a hobby and it was a fun one to do. But in the year we haven't
put out an episode. We've been number one in more than 35 countries in aviation for the aviation category, including major ones. We've been number 3 in China. We've been number 1 in Japan. We've been number 1 in Hong Kong. We're number 1 in Dubai. Number 1 in UAE. We're number 1 in Qatar. Number 1 in India. Crazy places, we've been number 1, and we still rank at number 1, 2, 3 in a lot of places. Meaning that first, maybe people miss travel. They kind of re-listen to past episodes, I guess, because why would you? But thank you. Thank you. And that's the reason I hesitated, because I'm saying maybe when we shut up, people actually do listen. So maybe I'm jinxing it.
They're subscribing to the silence.
So guys, if you are flying, enjoy, and see you in the next episode, whenever that is.
Safe travels, guys.
Safe travels. I don't remember what I used to say I don't remember. I'll find a new one anyway.
I don't know. It was almost like a reflex.
Habit.